Hey, what is going on, YouTube? Aaron here. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day here. We've got a fun one for you in today's video. We are, of course, in the Minotaur here, and this game is a great example of when things don't go exactly according to plan, how you reposition, how you read game flow. Just look and play based off what your team is doing and try to come out with the victory. Now, we are, of course, with some mates in this one. Mr. Don't Peek, Mark himself. I think he was in the Colombo, and Mr. Phalanx, as you can see, was in the Z52 here. And this was actually right around when the Z52 was first available through the Bureau. So Phalanx was going out and absolutely dominating people with that pretty OP sonar at the time. However, in this particular game, he overpressed just a little bit. He was dominating for the 4 or 5 games we played, and then, of course, the one where, you know, the enemy kind of counters him. That's, of course, the video I get for a recording. So, yeah, that's usually how it is with YouTubers, but if you don't know that by now, well, I've got some bad news for you. And speaking of bad news, we've got some bad news for this Shimakaze here. He is detected. Phalanx moves in. We pop our smoke, as smoke is a great way to create instant concealment for one of the strongest DPM ships in the game. Of course, it wouldn't be a Minnow video without the classic radar versus smoke debate. And unless, of course, you are a clown troll from the comments, you realize that each of them has their own unique pros and cons, and in the right set of circumstances, both of them can be effective. Especially in a set of circumstances like this, when at the end of the game, pay attention to how useful our smoke is. In this particular situation here, the battleships didn't necessarily push up, so we're kind of just waiting for that Shima to either make a mistake or try and gain another position on him. In the meantime, though, this Des Moines has pushed forward just a touch too far, and we're gonna lob our very floaty shells over the island and take a good chunk of damage off of him. When you can get broadsides with this British short fuse AP with the improved pen angles, you just love to see this damage start to rack up. It is just a wonderful sight. Looking at our team's position, though, we don't really have too many advantages elsewhere on the map. Our Yamato, who spawned over there at Alpha, decided it was a good idea to come over here to Bravo for some reason, even though we had pretty much full control of this cap, so an immediate misposition by him. On top of that, our ships at sea are both gaining those island advantages there. However, there is nobody spotting for them, and the battleship is actually kiting away as our Schlieffen goes down in under 3 minutes there. Which brings me back around to the points I was trying to emphasize at the beginning of this video. Situational awareness, positioning, and just paying attention to game flow. We all know that the Schlieffen is one of the strongest legendary tier brawling battleships. However, if you overextend and go into a situation like that, you are going to lose that engagement 9 times out of 10. Of course, a Schlieffen should be able to one-on-one a Des Moines, and some people just think it's mono-e-mono, I'm gonna go brawl and win like a man, and instead, he is now eliminated and our team is now down a battleship. Now, good for our Shima for taking out that Des Moines with the torpedo, and good for our teammates at sea there for eliminating that Alaska. So if beginning message of this video is do not overextend. Now, of course, a select few teammates will hear that, and they will sit at the back of the map for the entire game, shooting their battleship at 19.5 kilometers, getting 50,000 damage and blaming everyone else except for themselves. As we have said so many times in the past, Legends is like a good, approaching a girl or guy at the bar, right? You have to do it nice and slow, you can't be too aggressive, but you need to eventually do it if you want to have success. You cannot just sit there and sit back and hope that they come up to you. And right on cue, we display what we are talking about here. Early game, if you push into the Bravo Cap and a Mino, you can be certain that you will be heading back to port in early succession there. However, with the reposition that we had, the passiveness of the enemy team, and Phalanx having his Hydro down, we decide to support our teammate, push into this cap here. The Shima, we believe, is in this smoke screen, and we do have our sonar running. So we are pushing ahead here in order to try and spot him and eliminate him. However, as we mentioned, there are a few battleships out there, and there is even one to the left, which has been undetected for some time, so we do not know his position. And that is a huge part of playing a cruiser, is paying attention and knowing where all of your threats are. And speaking of threats, we are now detected here without necessarily knowing where that Shimakaze is. I thought he was potentially out here to the right. As you can see, the cap is not contested now. That is when Phalanx pushes forward, that Shima becomes detected, and we are going to open fire. Now, I do want to give some credit to the Shima here. He actually decides not to shoot, and without Phalanx pursuing him, he is able to go undetected there, which is a very smart play. In the meantime, though, we do actually get an assistant cap in the first 6 minutes in the Mino here, further emphasizing the importance of positioning, concealment, and pretty much everything we have talked about through the majority of this game. And something we mentioned earlier is DPM, and here it comes. Aiming at the superstructure of the Kurfürst in a Mino is probably every Mino's dream play here. We launched some preemptive torpedoes, but I honestly wish I would have saved them. As you can see, our Yamato has yet to be touched there in the back of the map. But the Kurfürst decides to angle out to our allies over there at Charlie, which is why it is so important to get a flank. And here is just where things start to go south for this game. That Schlieffen has actually pushed in and started to hydro Phalanx there. He turns out and unfortunately turns directly into a Shima torpedo. So now we are both destroyers down, with the enemy getting alpha and having a pretty good advantage in terms of spotting and capping ability. I would like to mention, if I had hit a few of those shots a few moments ago or even earlier in the game, that Shima probably would have been eliminated a lot sooner and Phalanx would have been alive, which just brings me to another point in talking about blaming other players or something like that. If Phalanx wasn't in my division and I didn't know exactly what had happened, it would be very easy to blame him for this game potentially going south. However, he was doing what we had asked him to do. He just got caught in a very unfortunate set of circumstances. The Schlieffen had pushed in at just the right time, popping him on his sonar, and the Shima had just launched his wall of skill. As I mentioned, though, I bring that up just to give you guys a little perspective. Sometimes you see the raging captain, and in most circumstances, those who die early, it is probably their fault, but you do have to look at your actions as well. And speaking of my actions here, Mark is pushing in to try and draw away the attention from that Schlieffen Yamato Montana, as well as defend the only other cap we have. So we decide to not shoot and go dark, and that is just a skill that you must have as a cruiser player. You must resist the urge to not pull that trigger and allow yourself to go undetected. As by doing so, we are now able to reposition, as we can see Mark become the sacrificial lamb there in the center of the cap. Probably not the best position to put yourself in, however, it did give us a little bit time to escape, as well as draw a lot of the enemy fire away from him, allowing our teammates to survive. And of course, that Yamato who spawned over there at Alpha is now realizing why it is never a good idea to abandon the flank you spawn on, as he catches a few gearing torps from that gearing and Montana over there, who are allowed to roam free. It is around this point in the game, though, that my remaining smoke is essentially detrimental to our team's success. A huge shout out to Mark for getting that elimination there and trying to even things out as best he could. Our team does have a pretty decent stranglehold over there on Charlie, as long as they don't chase that last remaining cruiser to the end of the map. They either have to do that very quickly or come back and help us here in the middle. As you can see, our Yamato, who grossly mispositioned, is dead, losing all of his health in 2 minutes there. A good rule of thumb to have, unless you're in a destroyer or an extremely fragile light cruiser like the Mino, you want to utilize your health appropriately with the time remaining in the game. The first third of your health in the first 5 minutes, the second third in the second 5 minutes, and the final third in the final 5 minutes. And Mark was actually a pretty good example of that. We are now approaching the final, last 5 minutes of the game, and he had about a third of his health left before that Schlieffen unfortunately torpedoed him. And that is when we look up at our team, and we have 3 ships chasing 1 to the back of the map, which typically just doesn't work. Now, fortunately for our team, they do have me, which realizes that if I can hang out here and just distract and harass the enemy long enough, eventually these clowns will kill that ship, and the only thing they have left to do is come back and shoot these ships. On top of that, this Montana is kind of sailing towards us. You can see he is within our torpedo range, and with our concealment, I do believe we were running Fraser with Makawa on this particular build, as well as with concealment module for the Mino, we are able to get within stealth torpedo range, meaning we are able to torpedo outside of our concealment. Our team does actually manage to get the elimination on that Brisbane, so if we can hold out for just a little bit longer, then they will have nothing else to shoot at except for these ships here in the middle. So we're kind of just waiting on them to reposition, and that is unfortunately when we actually get detected. That Daring has worked his way back over to us. I believe I said Gearing earlier on, but it was definitely a Daring there. But regardless of that, we are still detected. And I decided to kite out here. We could have, stopped and smoked up and potentially farmed these guys for a bit. But if you actually notice, they aren't necessarily focused on us. You can see that Montana's guns are turned the other way. They are focused on those ships over there at Charlie, which is a good thing as we can now reposition once again. Playing the long game sometimes is going to net you much better results than simply YOLO rushing in and dying. This game is like chess with guns. You have to place your pieces appropriately and sometimes set up some moves later down the line. And that is pretty much what we did throughout this entire game. Of course, we had help from our team throughout the way as that Napoli actually goes down and ties this game up once again. If you're paying attention to the scoreboard, however, you'll notice that we are actually down on points and caps. So if the game were to finish this way, we would lose. So it is at this point, of course, that we have no other plays left than to push in here and try to get eliminations and potentially take this cap back with a little bit of time remaining in order to get the win. That is, of course, when you notice that the Daring pops his smoke screen, which allows us to go concealed for just a moment. So we're going to try and rush him in his smoke. Unfortunately, he wants a little bit more of the fight. He leaves his smoke screen there, detecting us once again. We preemptively pop our heel as we see the salvo on the way from that Montana. In addition to that, we're going to go ahead and pop our smoke screen for a little bit of concealment and start to rain on this Montana. Now, in certain situation, this might not be a good move, as we know that that Daring is quickly approaching. However, if we shoot and we are detected, we know that the Daring would be relatively close. We can pop out of our smoke and try to eliminate him. Now, it is certainly not going to be an easy task with a Montana 10 kilometers from us, and with how large the Minotaur's citadel is, you are playing a risky game. However, it is a game we have to play because our teammates are still fighting over there at sea. Again, going back to the chess game that Legends sometimes can be, you have to assess the situation and just put your ship in the most favorable outcome. Is it going to work out in every game? Certainly not. But there are definitely things you can do even when all hope seems lost, and that is essentially what we did in this game. I decide that it's time, though. We're going to go ahead and push out here, hopefully catch this Daring, while also trying to main somewhat, angle to this Montana, even though he can overmatch us. We can show a little bit of our belt, but he can just go right through our big British nose there. We peek at the Montana, trying to dodge his salvo. We catch the Daring inside his concealment. Yeah, and he is in a world of hurt. He actually does do a decent bit of damage to us, switching to his AP. The Montana kind of sails his shot towards our back section. And that is when the Daring makes a little bit of a precarious play here. He decides to go out of his smoke. Now, of course, we probably would have got him with the blind fire. He only had a little bit of health left. But we get that elimination, and now it is just us and that Montana. But by going out of his smoke, the Daring all but guaranteed that we would detect him. We get lucky enough to where the Montana does aim at our bow, but we turned in just enough to where it was just a penetration and an overpen on the bow section, and he did not get lucky enough to hit our citadel. So we now have a chance to torpedo this Montana and end this game. You can see that the Montana was reversing here, and that is when I decide to utilize my single fire torpedoes. And I almost never, I should have known better. The single fire torpedoes are great, sure, when a ship is rushing around the corner and you can maybe get all of them on target. More often than not, though, you will see yourself whiffing or missing all of those single fire torpedoes unless, of course, that battleship is sailing in a straight line here. But we get the second set off the wide spreads. We launch one long, we launch one short, and as you can see, those are clearly going to hit. So even if we do go down here, we still will get that elimination and allow our team to win. We decide to switch to the bow here as, just selecting different parts of the ship that your guns can match and fully penetrate there is always going to net you more damage overall. But we connect one torpedo, which is just enough. We actually did manage the high caliber as well. So with some nifty cruisermanship there, we're able to place first on our team, 2 kills and a 3,200 base XP score. A huge shout out to pretty much all of our team there. Pretty good scores across the board, as well as the enemy team as well. That was just a well-played game, you know, through and through. I know that particular replay may have not been the most exciting, but sometimes I like to do those replays where potential mistakes were made and you guys can learn along the way, as that is really the only way you get better, is learning from mistakes, analyzing other plays, and just thinking about the game simply more than sailing your boat forward and clicking right trigger. Now, there are certainly times where that is all I want to do, is sail my boat forward and click right trigger. But by thinking about things other than that, you know, positioning and things like that, you will find yourself getting better results overall, even if you aren't necessarily going full sweat, try hard in every game. But that is the video. I've spent way too long in this narration already, so hope you guys have a fantastic day. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm out. Peace.